Whispers of Earth. The shuttle doors hissed open, revealing a panorama that stole Alera's breath. Xylo's Academy wasn't a building. It was a biosphere, a shimmering geodesic dome nestled within the alien landscape. Violet trees dripped with phosphorescent moss, and crystalline structures pulsed with internal light. Even the air hummed with an energy that tickled her skin. She gripped her worn leather satchel, a familiar weight against the strangeness, and stepped onto the shimmering ramp. The Xylo's Academy was renowned. Throughout the galactic sectors, a place where only the most brilliant minds, from species beyond counting, were admitted. And she, Alera Vance, the sole human representative, felt acutely out of place that a tall, slender being with skin like polished obsidian approached. Its eyes, multifaceted and gleaming like captured starlight, regarded her with an unsettling intensity. Alera Vance, it stated, the words resonating with a faint echo. I am Xyler, designated liaison for your integration. Alera offered a tentative smile. It's a pleasure to meet you, Xyler. Xyler's expression didn't change. Pleasure is a subjective human construct. Follow me. She fell in a step beside Xyler, her gaze darting around. Students of all shapes and sizes flowed through the iridescent pathways. Some were bipedal, others multi-limbed. Some seemed to defy gravity altogether. Floating serenely through the air, a group of reptilian beings with iridescent scales glanced her way. Their eyes narrowed with what she interpreted as curiosity mixed with disdain. She heard snippets of their sibilant language, the tone clearly less than complimentary. They are discussing your fragility, Xyler stated, seemingly reading her mind. Humans are perceived as emotionally volatile and physically weak. You will find the academic rigor challenging, but it is your capacity to handle the social dynamics that will truly test you. Alera swallowed, trying to ignore the knot of anxiety tightening in her stomach. She'd read the reports, of course. She knew the Xylo's Academy held a rather low opinion of humanity. Her selection as the exchange student had been met with disbelief back on Earth. Most considered her too unassuming, too quiet, but she'd seen something in those reports. Something beyond the condescension, that a flicker of genuine scientific curiosity. They reached her assigned quarters, a small, Spartan room with a viewport. Overlooking the alien forest, it was functional, not welcoming. Classes begin tomorrow at the third bell cycle, Xyler stated, its voice devoid of inflection. A schedule is preloaded onto your datapad. Familiarize yourself with the Academy's regulations. Ignorance is not an acceptable excuse for deviation. With that, it turned and glided away, leaving Alera alone in the echoing silence. She unpacked slowly, placing her few personal belongings on the stark metal shelf, a framed photograph of her family back on Earth, a worn copy of Moby Dick. Its pages dog-eared and marked with annotations on a small, smooth stone she'd picked up on a beach as a child, talismans against the vast, unknowable universe. Later, she ventured out, drawn by the soft glow emanating from the central plaza. Students were gathered in small groups, discussing complex theories with animated gestures. She observed them from a distance, trying to decipher the unspoken rules of their interactions. Their logic was sharp, their intellect undeniable, but there was a certain detachment in their discourse, that a lack of empathy, perhaps that are simply a different way of processing information. She watched as a small, furry creature with large, expressive eyes stumbled, dropping a pile of datapads. Several students stepped over it. Without a second glance, Alera hesitated, then rushed forward, gathering the scattered tablets. Are you all right? She asked, offering the datapads back to the creature. Its fur bristled, and it cowered slightly. I am functional, it squeaked, taking the datapads with trembling claws. Thank you, human. The words were hesitant, as if speaking to her was a risky endeavor. Alera, she corrected gently. My name is Alera. The creature blinked its large eyes. Zerp, I am Zerp. Then, with a quick bow, it scurried away, disappearing into the crowd. Alera watched it go, a strange mix of sadness and resolve swirling within her. The Academy saw humans as weak because of their emotions. But perhaps, she thought, their capacity for empathy was not a weakness, but a strength that could bridge the vast gulf between species, between logic and feeling, between the cold indifference of the universe and the warm, beating heart of Earth. She touched the smooth stone in her pocket, feeling its familiar weight. She wasn't here to simply survive. She was here to understand, and maybe, just maybe, to make them understand her. She closed her eyes and listened. Faint but undeniable, a vibration in the ground beneath her feet. Whispers of Earth carried across the stars, the species of interest. For your next assessment, Professor Zarthax's voice, a low, gravelly rumble amplified by the auditorium speakers, cut through the usual pre-assignment chatter. You will each select a species from your assigned planet. For most of you, that will be Earth, and present a comprehensive analysis of its evolutionary adaptations, ecological role, and potential threat level to the wider galactic community. A collective groan rippled through the lecture hall. Elara Vance sighed inwardly. Sinking slightly in her grav chair, she'd hoped for something more, engaging to Zarthax, with his reptilian eyes and perpetually skeptical expression, was notoriously fond of dry, analytical exercises. Creativity is encouraged, Zarthax added, a faint flicker of amusement in his gaze, as if anticipating their discontent. But sentimentality will be penalized. Focus on demonstrable facts, and avoid the usual mammalian suspects and domestic canines. No felines, no primates that I expect originality. Elara doodled idly on her datapad, sketching a stylized image of a chameleon. They were fascinating creatures, masters of camouflage and possessing a unique tongue projection mechanism. But were they threatening? Probably not. She scrolled through the Earth biodiversity database, a dizzying array of options blurring before her eyes. Insects, fungi, plants, the sheer diversity was overwhelming. Pathetic, really. Jax's voice drawled from beside her. He was lounging back in his chair, his scaled hands laced behind his head, a low-level dignitary. He possessed a sense of entitlement that his limited intellect barely justified. Imagine being assigned to study humans. What threat could they possibly pose? Elara bit back a retort that Jax's dismissive attitude towards Earth culture was a constant irritant. They're more complex than you give them credit for, she mumbled, still scrolling. Jax chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Complex, they wage wars over imaginary lines on a map. They weep over fictional characters. Their most advanced technology is, what? Exploding rockets? Please. He adjusted a decorative scale on his forehead, a gesture that Elara recognized as a sign of deep self-satisfaction. I'll probably just do a presentation on their livestock. Cows, maybe. The threat they pose is methane emissions. Hilarious. Elara ignored him, focusing her attention back on the database. She skipped past the mammals, the birds, the reptiles, her fingers stilled on a section dedicated to marine life. Sharks, apex predators of the ocean. Ancient, powerful, and undeniably lethal. She clicked on the first entry, Carcharodon carcharias, the great white shark. Images flooded her datapad, sleek, streamlined bodies cutting through the water, rows of serrated teeth glinting in the sunlight. Their evolutionary history stretched back millions of years, a testament to their effectiveness as hunters. Their hunting instincts were raw, instinctual, and devoid of the sentimentality that Zarthax so despised. A slow smile crept across Elara's face. Now this was interesting. She delved deeper, researching their hunting strategies, their sensory adaptations, their impact on the marine ecosystem. They were more than just mindless killing machines. They were intricate components of a delicate balance. Jax, oblivious to Elara's sudden focus, continued his tirade. Honestly, the entire concept of art is baffling. Emotional expression through colored pigments on canvas or rhythmic noises. Utterly primitive. Elara tuned him out, her mind racing. Sharks weren't just a threat to unsuspecting surfers. They were a vital part of the ocean's health, keeping populations in check and preventing ecological imbalances. And while they rarely attacked humans, the sheer power and efficiency of their predatory adaptations were undeniable. She glanced at Jax, still pontificating about the supposed superiority of his own cultures. logical art forms, which mostly involved complex algorithms generating geometric patterns. The contrast was striking that he saw only weakness and absurdity in humanity. But Alara saw potential and a complex web of contradictions that defied easy categorization. Perhaps, just perhaps, she could use this assignment to make him and the rest of the class see something beyond the surface, that T.O. understand that even in a species deemed low threat, there could be hidden depths, primal power, and a capacity for both destruction and survival that was anything but pathetic. The image of the great white shark, teeth bared and eyes cold, filled her datapad. This, she thought, might be the perfect species of interest. A predator's profile. Sharks, Alara declared, the word echoing oddly within the Zenith Academy's vast lecture hall. Heads swiveled, eyes of every imaginable configuration fixed on her, a ripple of stifled laughter. A low undercurrent of disbelief washed through the assembled students. Professor Zarthax, his iridescent scales flashing a clear signal of his displeasure, arched a bony brow above one of his quartet of eyes. Sharks, Miss Vance? Among the myriad galactic predators cataloged, you select sharks? The tap of his claw against his data slate was unnecessarily sharp. Are you certain you grasp the assignment's parameters? We are dissecting sophisticated hunting strategies, not primitive aquatic fauna. Alara felt the coarse weave of her uniform suddenly magnified under the collective scrutiny. Sharks were not her first choice, that she'd envisioned safety, predictability. The life cycle of a nebula, perhaps, but then she caught the professor's challenging gleam, a dare to defy the galaxy's low expectations of humanity. And in that instant, a shark, a paragon of silent, streamlined efficiency, took hold of her imagination. Yes, Professor, she replied, her voice gaining purchase. I posit that sharks provide a compelling case study in predatory adaptation. Their lineage stretches back eons, and their hunting methods, though appearing rudimentary, are remarkably effective. A brittle insectal snicker emanated from the rear. Alara pressed on, past the point of no return. Now came the justification. Zenith Academy's library was a sprawling maze of cascading data streams, shimmering holographic displays, and hushed scholastic murmurs. Alara plunged into the towering stacks, the reek of ionized parchment and alien flora thick in the air. She shunned the sections dedicated to draconian shadow stalkers and the crystalline predators of the Xylos cluster, opting instead for the treasure trove of Earth's oceanic archives. Hours dissolved. She absorbed information voraciously, her data slate illuminated with anatomical schematics, behavioral studies, and ecological surveys. The initial apathy evaporated, replaced by an unexpected captivation. She learned of hammerheads, with their uncanny ability to sense electrical fields, great whites, erupting from the depths in spectacular breaches, and the surprisingly intricate social interactions observed in certain shark species. She came to understand that perceived simplicity masked profound mastery. Sharks had foregone the need for complex brains or energy-intensive psychic abilities. They had, instead, achieved dominion through instinct, honed adaptation, and implacable tenacity. Sleep became secondary. Alara constructed diagrams, meticulously weaving a holographic simulation of a shark pursuing its quarry. She integrated sonar recordings of potential prey, thermal signatures of their hunting grounds, and even a simulated rendering of the sensory chaos engulfing a small fish as a great white bore down. Her objective was to evoke, not just explain. She aimed to transport them to the frigid, lightless realm of the deep, to let them feel the electric hum of anticipation, the brutal, unfiltered power of a predator sculpted by eons of evolution. Late one night, illuminated by the glow of her data slate, she unearthed a fascinating study focusing on sharks' sensory perception that detailed the lateral line, a network of fluid-filled canals running along their bodies, which allowed them to detect the faintest tremors in the water. Combined with electroreception, this granted them an almost preternatural awareness of their surroundings an idea ignited within her. Swiftly, Elara tweaked her simulation, layering in sensory input mimicking the shark's unique perspective. She pictured the class, seated in the lecture hall, experiencing the world through a shark's senses, sensing it with their very being. The prospect was both terrifying and invigorating. This had transcended the simple fulfillment of an assignment. This was about spotlighting something she genuinely respected, something that challenged preconceived notions about Earth and its inhabitants. It was about revealing the terrifying poetry of a predator distilled to its most elemental form. Jaws of the deep. "Good morning, esteemed members of the Xylos Academy," Elara began, her voice echoing slightly in the vast auditorium. A hollow projector flickered to life behind her, displaying a swirling nebula of primordial gases, the very stuff of stars. Today, I present a case study on an organism that, despite its terrestrial origins, embodies principles of evolutionary efficiency and sensory mastery applicable even in the most extreme cosmic environments: the shark. Professor Zarthax, his 6 eyes narrowed behind his crystalline spectacles, emitted a low hum that resonated through the chamber. It wasn't exactly a disruptive noise, but it carried a palpable air of academic disapproval. "Sharks? Really?" Elara ignored the subtle protest. She advanced the hollow projection. The nebula resolved into a timeline, stretching back billions of years. Sharks predate the dinosaurs by nearly 200 million years. They survived 5 major extinction events, adapting and thriving while countless other species vanished. The timeline morphed, showcasing a gallery of ancient shark forms. Cladus Lake, a sleek, agile hunter from the Devonian period. Helicoprion, its bizarre, circular tooth whirl a testament to nature's experimental designs. Megalodon, a leviathan whose jaws could swallow a small spacecraft whole, that a ripple of amusement spread through the assembled Xylosian, Cthar, and even a few stoic Grolac students. These were creatures of myth, of ancient history, hardly relevant to the current study of interstellar survival. Elara clicked to the next image. A great white shark breaching, sunlight glinting off its razor-sharp teeth. Today, over 500 species of sharks inhabit Earth's oceans, each uniquely adapted to its environment, but they all share a core set of evolutionary advantages. She tapped a control, and the hollow projection zoomed in on the shark's skin. Dermal denticles, microscopic, tooth-like scales that reduce drag and increase swimming efficiency. Think of them as natural, self-cleaning armor plating, capable of withstanding immense pressure and minimizing energy expenditure. A short video played, showcasing a shark navigating a coral reef with effortless grace. Their skeletal structure is composed entirely of cartilage, providing exceptional flexibility and resilience that a broken bone for most species is a death sentence in space. But cartilaginous structures enable increased survivability in situations involving impacts, decompression, or rapid acceleration. Elara transitioned to a diagram of a shark's brain. But their true advantage lies in their sensory capabilities. Sharks possess electroreceptors, known as ampullae of Lorenzini, which allow them to detect the electrical fields generated by the muscle contractions of other organisms. They can sense a heartbeat from miles away. She paused, letting the implications sink in. The initial amusement had begun to fade, replaced by a dawning realization. These were not just mindless predators. They also have an exceptional sense of smell, capable of detecting minute traces of blood in the water. A single drop can trigger a hunting response. Elara displayed a simulation. A school of bait fish scattering in panic as a shark homed in on a distant, almost imperceptible scent trail. The simulation demonstrated how their lateral line, running the length of their body, allows sharks to detect vibrations and pressure changes in the water, providing near 360-degree awareness of their surroundings. "Imagine," Elara continued, her voice gaining confidence. "A creature that can see in near darkness, sense the faintest electrical signature, detect minute vibrations, and smell the presence of potential prey from astronomical distances. The hollow projection now showed a shark navigating a complex underwater maze, its movements precise and deliberate. These are not just hunters. They're information-gathering machines, constantly analyzing their environment to optimize their chances of success. Their hunting strategies are complex and varied, ranging from ambush predation to cooperative hunting. Alara pointed to the screen, highlighting the shark's keen eyesight. And contrary to popular belief, their vision is exceptional, particularly in low light conditions. Some species can even see in color. Professor Zarthax shifted in his seat, a flicker of something akin to interest now visible in his multifaceted eyes. The hum had stopped. The Grolax students, usually impassive, were now leaning forward. This Earth creature was presenting a compelling case. Alara knew she had their attention. The real demonstration, the one that would truly test their perceptions, was yet to come. She took a deep breath. Now, let's examine a specific scenario. Challenging the apex. The holographic shark swam silently across the lecture hall, its projected form rippling slightly where it intersected with the back row of Xyler's students. Alara Vance swallowed. Her throat suddenly dried as she'd spent weeks building this simulation, meticulously layering data points to create a convincing representation of a great white hunting in its natural environment. Professor Zarthax, a being whose 6 eyes usually held an expression of perpetual disdain, was actually watching, almost intently. As you can see, Alara began, her voice amplified by her translator implant. The Carcharodon carcharias, or great white shark, is a marvel of evolutionary engineering. Its sensory apparatus allows it to detect minute electrical fields produced by prey, giving it an unparalleled advantage in low-visibility conditions. A snide laugh cut through her explanation. Jax, a hulking Krogan with skin like polished obsidian, leaned back in his gravity chair, his mandibles twitching. Sharks? Really, Vance? You're using Earth sharks as a compelling case study? Pathetic. My pet Grobner has a higher kill rate. Alara felt a flush creep up her neck, but she forced herself to remain calm. She'd anticipated this. With all due respect, Jax, your Grobner likely benefits from a controlled environment and a diet of pre-slaughtered livestock. The great white thrives in a dynamic, often unpredictable ocean environment where survival is a constant struggle. Struggle? Jax scoffed. They're overgrown fish. My cousin uses them for target practice during his vacation on Glargan. 7 claims they barely put up a fight. Several Krogan in the room chuckled, their resonant voices vibrating the floor. Zarthax shifted, his mandibles clicking in what Alara hoped was an amusement. I can assure you, Jax, that your cousin's anecdotal experience is not representative of the species as a whole, Alara retorted, projecting a graph illustrating the bite force of a great white, measured in newtons. This chart demonstrates the immense power behind their jaws that it exceeds that of most terrestrial predators, even those significantly larger. Jax waved a dismissive hand. Power is irrelevant if the target is soft. Humans, like you, are soft. Therefore, anything dangerous to a human is inherently insignificant. Alara bit back a retort. She needed to stay focused to dismantle his argument piece by piece. That's a fallacy, Jax. The shark's power isn't solely directed at humans. It preys on a wide variety of marine life, including seals, sea lions, and even other sharks. Their impact on the ecosystem is profound. She brought up a new simulation, showcasing a complex food web. Arrows pulsed with light, illustrating the flow of energy from phytoplankton to apex predators. Consider the long-term effects of removing such a predator. Populations of mid-level consumers explode, leading to overgrazing of vital resources and, ultimately, a collapse of the entire ecosystem. Ecosystem, Jax drawled, feigning disinterest. Such quaint Earth terminology. Do we terraform planets for breakfast? Alara tightened her grip on the datapad. Terraforming is a large-scale manipulation. Jax, this is about understanding the delicate balance within a naturally occurring environment. These creatures are what we on Earth call apex predators. They occupy the highest trophic level, shaping the behavior and evolution of everything below them. She highlighted a section of the food web depicting the migratory patterns of sea turtles. Research has shown that the presence of sharks influences the behavior of sea turtles, encouraging them to avoid certain areas and preventing overgrazing of seagrass beds. Remove the sharks and the turtles decimate the seagrass, leading to habitat loss for countless other species. Zarthax shifted again, his multifaceted eyes narrowing. Apex predator, he echoed, the words sounding strange in his guttural voice. Explain this, Apex. Alara seized the opportunity. An apex predator is at the top of the food chain. IT has no natural predators of its own. Its role is not simply to kill and consume, but to regulate to maintain balance. The absence of an apex predator has cascading effects, disrupting the intricate web of life. She paused, letting the concept sink in. The holographic shark continued its silent swim, a silent testament to the power and complexity of the creature she was trying to portray. Even Jax seemed momentarily silenced, his face a mask of grudging consideration. Perhaps, just perhaps, she was getting through to them. The challenge wasn't just about defending sharks. It was about challenging their preconceived notions, about proving that Earth, despite its perceived weaknesses, held valuable lessons. For the entire galaxy, terror in the tank. The hollow tank shimmered, solidifying into a hyper-realistic panorama of the Pacific. Sunlight fractured on the surface, dancing in ethereal beams that illuminated the reef below. Alara adjusted her neural interface, amplifying the subtle clicks and scrapes of the underwater world. Observe, she said, her voice amplified through the lecture hall. The Carcharodon carcharias, more commonly known as the great white shark. Within the simulated reef, a shadow detached itself from the kelp forest's edge. Its movement was fluid, economical, betraying none of the raw power it possessed. The shark, a meticulously rendered specimen based on decades of Earth-based research, patrolled its territory with a quiet authority. Alara highlighted the shark's ampullae of Lorenzini, the gel-filled pores around its snout. These electroreceptors allow it to detect the faint electrical fields generated by other creatures, even those buried in the sand. That a heartbeat, a muscle twitch, it all becomes a signal. She continued, detailing its layered hunting strategy, a calculated blend of ambush and pursuit, adapted to prey across diverse environments. The projection shifted, illustrating a seal silhouetted against the sunlit surface. The shark, unseen, ascended from the depths. Notice the counter shading, Alara explained. Dark gray above, blending with the murky depths. White below, mirroring the sun-drenched surface. This makes it virtually invisible to its prey until the very last moment. The simulation played out in agonizing slow motion. The shark breached, a flash of white belly and rows of serrated teeth, clamping down on the seal with terrifying force. A crimson bloom briefly stained the water before dissipating. A collective shudder rippled through the hall. Even among a species accustomed to predators far more exotic and deadly, the great white evoked a primal fear. Alara saw it in their widened eyes, the subtle tensing of their bodies. She understood it was a fear born of vulnerability, of recognizing a hunter perfectly adapted to its environment, utterly indifferent to human concerns. The great white inspires terror, Alara acknowledged, but it is not a mindless killing machine. Its behavior is complex, influenced by factors such as prey availability, social dynamics, and even individual personality. She manipulated the simulation, highlighting the shark's brain structure. Its brain, while proportionally smaller than our own, is surprisingly sophisticated. Studies have shown evidence of problem-solving abilities, social learning, and even a rudimentary form of cooperation during hunts. Jax shifted in his seat, the metallic clang of his cybernetic arm echoing in the sudden silence. He mumbled something inaudible, but his body language radiated impatience. Alara ignored him, focusing on Professor Zarthax, whose multifaceted eyes seemed to glint with an unsettling mixture of curiosity and amusement. She displayed images of shark attack survivors, scars, prosthetic limbs, Haunted expressions. These incidents, while tragic, are statistically rare. More humans die from bee stings or falling coconuts. Yet, the fear persists, amplified by our own anxieties about the unknown lurking beneath the waves. Propaganda. Jax finally spat, his voice cutting through the air. Fear-mongering disguised as scientific analysis. What's your point, Earthling, to convince us that we should be afraid of oversized, primitive fish? Alara met his gaze, her expression unwavering. My point, Jax, is that fear is a powerful motivator. It shapes our perceptions, influences our decisions. Understanding the source of that fear, even when it seems irrational, can teach us a great deal about ourselves. She reactivated the simulation, this time focusing on the human element. A research vessel bobbed on the surface, its occupants peering into the depths with a mixture of fascination and apprehension. We are drawn to the shark, despite our fear, she said. We study it, track it, try to understand it, perhaps because, in some primal way, we recognize a reflection of ourselves, a creature driven by instinct, perfectly adapted to its role in the natural world. Jax slammed his fist on the desk, the sound jarring. This is ridiculous. You're romanticizing a monster. Just admit it. You're trying to justify your species' inherent messiness. Professor Zarthax raised a slender, chitinous hand. Silence, Mr. Kell. Ms. Vance has the floor. His voice, though soft, carried an undeniable weight of authority. He turned his gaze back to Alara, his multifaceted eyes gleaming. Continue, Ms. Vance. I find your analysis compelling. Alara took a deep breath. Ignoring Jax's simmering rage, she had Zarthax's attention. That was all that mattered for now. The shark in the hollow tank continued its endless patrol, a silent predator in a world of blue, a world that, despite its beauty, held a chilling reminder of the power of nature and the fragility of life, a human perspective. Alara adjusted the neural interface, its cool metal a stark contrast to the sudden heat rising in her cheeks. The lecture hall held a nervous silence, broken only by the hum of the VR projectors. She'd spent weeks refining this simulation, stripping away the scientific data, the behavioral analyses, focusing on something visceral, something human. Ready when you are, Ms. Vance, Professor Zarthax rumbled, his multifaceted eyes gleaming with an almost unsettling curiosity. He seemed genuinely intrigued by her thesis, a stark contrast to the dismissive glances she usually received. Thank you, Professor. Alara took a deep breath, activating sequence. This simulation will present a scenario from the perspective of a human encountering Carcharodon carcharias in its natural habitat. The hall plunged into darkness, a wave of warm, salty water washed over the senses. Murmurs rippled through the students as they found themselves floating in a turquoise ocean, sunlight dappling the surface above. The simulated sounds were perfect. The gentle lapping of waves, the distant cries of seabirds, the subtle creaks of a reef. It was idyllic, peaceful. Then, a shadow did a subtle darkening in the water. A shift in the ambient light that it was below, deep below, Alara had programmed it with. Excruciating care, the predatory presence building slowly, a creeping dread that mirrored the human victim's own growing unease. The simulation shifted, the perspective lowering, mimicking a swimmer treading water. The air suddenly felt thin, difficult to pull into simulated lungs. Panic bloomed in the hall. A shrill, bird-like cry pierced the simulated soundscape, followed by a guttural roar of distress. Jax, the hulking crow then, was flailing in his seat, his usually placid face contorted in terror. The shadow grew larger, more defined than a sleek, torpedo-shaped body, the glint of a dark eye, the faintest hint of serrated teeth. Then, acceleration, an impossible burst of speed. The water vibrated with its approach. A collective gasp filled the lecture hall. Even Zarthax shifted in his seat, his normally impassive features betraying a flicker of surprise. The simulated swimmer attempted to kick, to swim towards the distant, inviting light. Useless that a pressure, immense and terrifying, slammed. into their collective consciousness, a tearing, ripping sensation. The water around them exploded in a cloud of simulated blood, thick and disorienting. The sensation of being dragged down into the crushing depths, the fading sunlight shrinking to a distant pinprick, the world reduced to a vortex of red and pain. Then, darkness, silenced at a profound, absolute stillness. The simulation ended abruptly. The lights flickered back on, revealing a scene of utter chaos. Several students were slumped in, their seats pale and sweating. Others were hyperventilating, their eyes wide with residual fear. Jax was still trembling, his thick hide slick with a fine sheen of sweat. Ilara stood frozen, her heart pounding. Had she gone too far? She risked a glance at Professor Zarthax. His many eyes were narrowed, but not in anger, in thought. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice surprisingly soft. "Explain." Ilara swallowed hard. "My thesis argues that understanding the emotional impact of a predator-prey relationship is crucial to accurately assessing the potential threat level of a species. That'd be why focusing solely on quantifiable data, size, speed, bite force, we overlook the psychological impact, the terror that can render a creature far more vulnerable than its physical capabilities suggest." "Terror," Zarthax repeated, rolling the word around in his throat. "A weapon? Potentially," Ilara said, her voice gaining strength. "The shark in this instance doesn't simply bite. It terrifies. And that terror can be paralyzing, debilitating. My research indicates the human fear response, though seemingly irrational to some species, is a significant factor in our survival, and also our vulnerability." "Enough," Jax roared, finally regaining his composure. "This is absurd. A simple fish causing such hysteria. Humans are pathetic." Zarthax silenced him with a wave of his hand. "Mr. Crow, then, your personal discomfort is irrelevant." Ms. Vance continued. "I am intrigued by your analysis." He paused, his gaze fixed on Ilara. "You may proceed with the next phase of your presentation." Ilara let out a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. She had gotten through to him. Despite the near riot, she had a chance, but she knew, with a chilling certainty, that the next phase would be even more unsettling, shattered perceptions. The silence in the lecture hall was thicker than nebula gas. Several Xylarian cadets still hadn't removed their VR headsets, their chitinous faces twitching slightly. The simulation, Ilara's simulation, had ended minutes ago, but the lingering dread was a tangible thing that a low groan escaped from Grom, a particularly boisterous Regalian known for his boasting and unflinching aggression. He ripped off his headset, his four eyes wide and unfocused. "By the void, I couldn't even scratch it." Ilara, standing at the front of the hall, felt a tremor of something akin to pride. She quickly tamped it down. Her thesis wasn't about proving human superiority, but about illustrating a different perspective. "The Great White," she said, her voice echoing slightly in the vast space. "Apex predator. Millions of years of evolution have honed it into a near-perfect killing machine in its environment." Professor Zarthax, whose iridescent scales shimmered with an unusual intensity, cleared his throat. "Cadet Vance, your simulation, it was unsettling." The helplessness experienced by the cadets was unexpected. Unsettling was an understatement. Ilara had designed the simulation to place the cadets, with their advanced weaponry and combat training, into the body of a human swimmer suddenly confronted by a great white shark. The objective wasn't to fight, but to survive, and most had failed spectacularly. The cadets, accustomed to dominating battlefields with energy weapons and hardened exoskeletons, found themselves facing a creature that relied on instinct, speed, and raw power, a creature utterly indifferent to their advanced technology. Jax, leaning against the back wall, arms crossed, finally spoke. It was effective. He spat the word out like it tasted foul. Too effective. Ilara met his gaze. The point, Jax, is that vulnerability isn't always a weakness. That it can be a catalyst for caution, for adaptation. Caution is for the weak, Grom snarled, still visibly shaken. Is it? Zarthax interjected, his voice surprisingly sharp. Or is it a prerequisite for survival? The simulation highlighted a crucial element often overlooked in our training: the importance of understanding and respecting the capabilities of your opponent, regardless of their perceived technological advancement. He turned his multifaceted gaze towards Alara. Cadet Vance, your thesis posits that humanity's perceived fragility has, in fact, fostered a unique form of resilience, a willingness to adapt and strategize based on an awareness of their limitations. Did I ask that correct? Yes, Professor, Alara replied. Humans haven't always been the strongest or the fastest, but we've learned to use our intelligence and adaptability to overcome challenges. Fear, in this context, becomes a tool, a motivator. Zarthax slowly nodded, his scaled head dipping in a gesture that was almost thoughtful. Intriguing, did I confess. I've always viewed humanity as sentimental, prone to irrational emotional outbursts. But this demonstrates a capacity for calculated survival that I had not previously appreciated. He gestured towards the deactivated VR pods. The cadets experienced a primal fear, a raw sense of vulnerability. This is not something we often encounter in our simulations, that we focus on strength, on dominance, on overwhelming force. Your simulation, Cadet Vance, forced them to confront their own limitations. Jax pushed himself off the wall and walked towards Alara, his brow furrowed. Fine, you made your point. Fear can be a motivator. Doesn't mean I like it. No one likes being afraid. Jax, Alara said softly. But understanding fear, acknowledging it, can be the first step to overcoming it. Zarthax addressed the remaining cadets. This exercise has been enlightening, dismissed, and I expect each of you to reflect on the lessons learned today, especially regarding preconceived notions about other species. He paused, his gaze lingering on Jax, and perhaps a greater appreciation for the complexities of human psychology. As the cadets filed out, a low murmur rippled through the hall. The Xylarians whispered amongst themselves, their chitinous faces displaying a new expression, something akin to respect, or perhaps a healthy dose of apprehension. Regardless, the perception of humanity had shifted ever so slightly within the hallowed halls of the Academy. The soft-skinned, emotionally erratic Earthlings were, perhaps, not so easily dismissed after all. Alara watched Jax leave, a strange mixture of relief and unease swirling within her. She had presented her thesis, she had defended her position, and she had, against all odds, made an impact, but she knew, deep down, that this was just the beginning. The real challenge lay ahead, convincing the Academy and the galaxy that humanity was more than just a collection of fragile creatures clinging to a volatile planet. They were survivors, and they were just getting started. Echoes of the deep. The murmuring started before Alara even finished packing away her holographic projector. She could feel the weight of eyes, not all unfriendly, boring into her. Professor Zarthax, his multifaceted eyes gleaming like polished obsidian, steepled his 6 fingers. Most unorthodox, Vance, he rumbled, the sound vibrating through the floor. Presenting the Carcharodon Carcharias as a model for resilience? A chorus of dissenting clicks and whirs erupted from the assembled students. A Grolak, whose chitinous armor gleamed under the artificial sun, snapped its mandibles. Resilience is forged in the crucible of constant warfare, not lurking. Alara took a deep breath. This was it. The Carcharodon Carcharias, she began, her voice surprisingly steady, operates in an environment of constant pressure, both literal and figurative. Its senses are finely tuned to detect the slightest disturbance. That IT adapts, not by brute force, but by precise application of energy. IT survives and thrives by understanding its limitations and exploiting its strengths. The Grolak scoffed, a dry, rattling sound. Strengths? It bleeds, breathes air, and is pathetically fragile outside its water. Fragility is a perspective, Alara countered, meeting the Grolak's gaze. It's vulnerable, yes, but that vulnerability forces it to be efficient, to be precise, to be adaptable. How many species, Grolak, can boast a lineage that stretches back hundreds of millions of years, unchanged, through mass extinctions? A ripple of surprise clicks past through the room. Zarthax slowly unfolded his fingers. Interesting, he conceded. The primitive Earth lexicon often equates strength with raw power. You posit a different definition, Vance Point 1 based on longevity through adaptation. Another student, a Sylvanian with skin like living bark, spoke, her voice a melodic hum. But adaptation alone is not enough. That IT lacks the spark of innovation, the drive to transcend limitations. Alara nodded. You are correct. Sharks are not innovators, but they are masters of their environment. And within that mastery, there's a different kind of strength, a strength born of understanding, of acceptance, of unwavering focus. Their spark is in their ability to continue, to remain. IT is about knowing when not to change. The debate continued for what felt like hours, branching into discussions of predator-prey relationships, the ethics of genetic engineering, and the very definition of strength across the galaxy. Alara found herself holding her own, defending her thesis with a passion she hadn't realized she possessed. She drew parallels between the shark's resilience and the human spirit, arguing that humanity's artistic expression, their empathy, were not weaknesses but adaptations that allowed them to connect, to learn, and to overcome challenges. When the bell finally chimed, signaling the end of the session, Alara felt drained but exhilarated. Zarthax dismissed the class with a curt nod, but as Alara gathered her belongings, he motioned for her to stay. Vance, he said, his voice softer now. Your presentation, it challenged my preconceived notions that I confess I viewed humanity as sentimental, weak. He paused, his multifaceted eyes flickering. Perhaps I was mistaken. Your shark, it represents a perspective I had not considered. Alara flushed with pride. Thank you, Professor. Do not mistake my words for unqualified approval, Zarthax cautioned. Your thesis still requires significant refinement, but you have given me much to consider. He paused again, then added almost grudgingly, continue your research, Vance. Explore this vulnerability as strength concept. You may find something illuminating. The following weeks were a blur of research, simulations, and late nights in the Academy Library. Alara pored over ancient texts, comparing the evolutionary paths of different species, searching for examples of resilience that went beyond sheer brute force. She found herself collaborating with students she had previously only nodded to in the hallways. The Sylvanian, Lyra, became a particularly valuable ally, offering insights into the symbiotic relationships within her own species. Alara also noticed a subtle shift in the way she was treated by her peers. The Grolak Thar, while still abrasive, now engaged her in vigorous debates during lunch. Others sought her out, curious about the Earth ecosystem and its strange, resilient creatures. The initial skepticism had not vanished, but it was now tempered with respect and genuine interest. One afternoon, while observing a simulation of a shark navigating a complex coral reef, Alara realized something profound. IT wasn't just about the shark itself. IT was about the entire ecosystem, the delicate balance of predator and prey, the constant struggle for survival. And within that struggle, there was a strange and terrible beauty. She knew then that her research was not just about proving humanity's strength. It was about fostering understanding, about bridging the gaps between species, about showing the galaxy that vulnerability could be a source of power. And she was just getting started. The echoes of the deep were just beginning to be heard.